Hey everybody, how's it going? I hope you're all having a lovely day and a lovely weekend. I traveled back here because I wanted to start cleaning out my apartment, organizing crap. I have way too much stuff here, and around 237 miles into a 240-mile road trip, right as I enter New York City, I get a flat tire. It's like God's trying to tell me something. Anyway, my thumbnail guy asked me what I thought of this. This is a Twitter thread from Linus Tech Tips where he's talking about piracy. I'm going to read you some of it and then give you my thoughts. I was going back and forth with the thumbnail guy, but I figured it would make more sense if I made it into a video rather than just a private message. So Linus did something here that personally I'm never going to do, which is he's going to show exactly how he makes his money. For my nonprofits, I will show you the bank statements. When it comes to me personally or my private businesses, that's my business, not yours. But he went above and beyond to show exactly how it is that his company makes money. And he said, wow, didn't imagine AdSense to be 1/5 of your income. Now I feel like a jerk being lazy and not customizing my ad blocker. Linus says, online websites and content creators are supported by ads. I thought this was pretty common knowledge. Ad blocking is the exact same thing as piracy. Literally the exact same thing. People will still do it, and I've been guilty of it at times, but we just need to be aware of the impacts, says Linus. The fan says, conflating blocking ads with piracy is silly. Why not encourage everyone to block ads but buy merch? At least your merch segues are amusing. The desk pads are awesome. Why not encourage everyone to torrent Stranger Things rather than subscribing to Netflix and then buy a Stranger Things themed Lego and t-shirt? You see now, it's literally the exact same thing. The payment for the content is ads. You're not watching, you're not paying for it. That is mildly different as Netflix is not ad supported. Netflix is a subscription service where you are paying for the content up front rather than it being distributed to you alongside advertisements. Gonna have to disagree there, Linus. I genuinely love watching your content on YouTube, but I'll still continue to block ads and buy merch instead. Linus says, go sneak into Cirque du Soleil without a ticket. When they try to kick you out, try the but I bought a soda and hoodie defense. You're just objectively wrong. The price is set by the seller, not the buyer. You can steal or pirate it, but then just admit that to yourself. To be clear, I've publicly said that a single merch purchase is worth more than a year of AdSense for a viewer. From a business standpoint, I don't even care. Just don't make the argument it's not piracy. Ethical piracy is still piracy. And then somebody says it's piracy because it's legal, which it isn't, but whatever. And he says, you put in quotes a thing I never said, which admittedly I hate when people that watch my stuff do that, but they do it all the time. It's piracy because you circumvented a digital protection to access content without paying, either in the form of money or time, never said it was illegal. And then the thread just continues and continues. So I wanted to give some input on this. The first thing I think I should do, and I'm going to try to do this in the beginning of videos where I discuss these types of topics, is state what my bias is. Obviously, I have a bias because YouTube dumps money in my bank account every month. Why is beyond me. When I started doing this content, which is pretty much just a bunch of angry man rants from Chair, this content sucked. Like I never had any idea that poorly recorded, unscripted, all over the place content would ever actually be content that people wanted to pay for. I started uploading in 2012. I turned on monetization in 2015. And the fact that more than 50 cents gets deposited in my bank account a year from this is incredibly surprising to me. The fact that anybody watches this garbage at all is honestly surprising to me, but whatever, you guys do. Why? Don't know, but I do get paid off of this content. That is obviously going to make me biased because I can't ignore the inherent bias present from the fact that you guys clicking this and then watching an ad are the reason that money exists. It's impossible to separate that, so it has to be mentioned up front. I also have a bias because Linus has given $20,000 to the 501c4 that I'm running, which is hiring lobbyists in many different states to try to get Right to Repair move forward, and I imagine a good chunk of that $20,000 came from his ad revenue that was generated by people not using AdBlock. I'd want to start with that Cirque du Soleil example just to get things started. The reason I think that that's a bad example, while I understand what he's getting at, you're talking about going into a show that you would typically have to pay a ticket for, I think it's off because of the numbers. The sheer magnitude of the numbers is what makes that example, in my opinion, irrelevant. So on YouTube, we have something called CPM. We get paid maybe $1, $2, $3, 50 cents per 1,000 views. It depends on your content, depends on your channel, but we get paid per 1,000 views, $1. So let's say you watch a video and you do not have ad block on. I get paid 1/10 of a cent for your view. That is a fraction of a penny. 10% of a penny is what I get paid when you watch a video without ad block. If you buy a shirt, let's say I make $10. That is 10,000 times more money than what I get paid if you do not use ad block and watch it. So if you use ad block and you watch my video and then you buy a piece of merchandise, I get paid 10,000 times as much money than I would if you watch the video without using ad block and didn't buy anything. Now let's go to the Cirque du Soleil example. Let's say that I'm going to see Cirque du Soleil's Paramore. Let's say that I saw that show 3 times because I had a celebrity crush on Ruby Lewis 6 years ago. And the ticket is $200 to that particular show. Now the merchandise, let's say it's a $10 t-shirt. The ticket is $200. The merchandise is $10. Which means that Cirque du Soleil would be collecting 5% as much money from me than they would be collecting from me if I actually paid for a ticket properly. A more apt example here would be if I gave Cirque du Soleil $2 million. Now, if I said, listen, I think Ruby Lewis's performance is absolutely amazing. Here's $2 million. They may be open to giving me a free ticket to a future show because I gave them $2 million. You understand where I'm coming from here? Like, it's so structurally different when it comes to the numbers that it's impossible to compare them as if they're alike. If I give you $2 million, I think you may be open to comping me on a $200 ticket because I gave you that much money. I don't think it's the same as just, I bought a cap, are you willing to let me into the show for free? When the cap or the candy is like $10 and the show is $200. So the first thing that I think is important to go over here is some of the definitions of piracy. So if we were to discuss something like music piracy is the illegal copying and distributing of recordings of a piece of music for which the rights owner did not give consent. So it is the copying and distributing. So when we're talking about copying and distributing, we are talking about something like, let's say, walking into a store, purchasing one CD, and then you have a CD duplicator at home, you duplicate 1,000 CDs, and you sell them for $5 or $10 a piece. You are then copying and distributing something that they did not give you consent to copy or distribute. One thing that I think is really important to understand and recognize is that back in the day, when the RIAA was suing people for downloading music, I hated how this was covered by the media. They would always cover it as they were getting sued for downloading music. However, if you look back from 2002 to 2006, when they were suing people for downloading music and trying to get those $3,000 settlements out of people, not a single one of them was sued because they downloaded content. They were sued for making it available. They were sued for uploading content because they couldn't sue them for downloading. The person who was doing something wrong was the uploader that was doing the copying and the distribution. When we're talking about something like a YouTube video, we're not talking about copying, nor are we talking about distributing. I am not taking that YouTube video off of YouTube, then putting it on rossmangroup.com after getting rid of the ads, and then serving you a Linus video from my website, nor and profiting from it. I am watching a video that is being served to be my YouTube, and I am parsing that content to remove the ad. I think parsing the content that is being fed to you to remove an ad is materially different from taking that content that's being distributed to you and then making it available to others via, Kazaa or LimeWire or posting it to Usenet or something like that. Again, I don't think you'll be able to find a single case when it comes to piracy where somebody who is receiving the content or downloading the content is being sued for doing that. They're being sued for distributing it. But moving on from that, I've talked about this in a video called Allow Yourself the Luxury of Honesty with Yourself. One of the things that drove me nuts is when I grew up, I grew up in a time where piracy was rampant because you had no options. So one example, when it comes to a television show like 24, if you missed an episode of 24, which is an amazing show back in the day, you had no option to rewatch that show. You couldn't go online and buy it for any amount of money. You had to wait for the DVD to come out a year later, or you had to wait for it to re-air in the summer 6 months later. So if you missed an episode of a TV show, you either downloaded a copy that somebody else pirated online, or you waited 6 months to see the copy that you missed. So when I grew up, in my day, piracy was a bit more acceptable to many people because you literally had no choice for many different things. If I have a portable media player like a Cohen A2, for those of you who are old enough to remember what the hell that is, and you wanted to watch a movie on it, you couldn't buy the movie in that format and put it on the player. You had to buy a portable DVD player and carry DVDs. Piracy made sense because you had nothing else. What used to bother me with the topic of piracy is when I would just see people justify certain things that just made no sense. Like they would say, listen, I am not buying this CD because I think $20 is a ripoff that's overpriced for what it costs to make the album. Well, even if they spend $250,000 in the studio to make that particular album and you actually like it. But the same person that says that will go on Twitch and give a $50 donation to a kid in his bedroom on a Casio keyboard that's playing something just because he thinks it's cool. At the end of the day, it's about what people are willing to pay for, not about the moral and ethical right or wrong, and I just kind of wish people would admit that. I can understand Linus's frustration with people when they are saying, well, this is the reason I'm doing it, when at the end of the day, it's just, you just didn't feel like paying for this. Again, it really drove me nuts when people would say $15 for the CD is, quote, overpriced. I just like this one song, when again, maybe $250,000 went into the making of that particular song. And again, you see, like, there's lots of people that are more than happy to spend like $50 or $200 tipping just some kid on Twitch with his Casio keyboard that's doing a cover of something because it's cool. Just one song. It's really... there is a lot of question as to what it is worth. We also live in a time in 2022 where there are infinitely more options to get things in the way that you want. YouTube Red is $10 a month, gives you access to pretty much everything on YouTube. You never see an ad. You can download it to your phone easily. So it's a bit different now than it was 20 years ago. So I can understand a little bit of the frustration there when somebody is using that, given the fact that it is so cheap, just dirt cheap nowadays to get content in the manner that you want to get that content. But that being said, there's a lot of arguments with regards to whether or not ads in and of themselves or not viewing the ad is piracy. And there are several arguments on this that I think are worth sharing. So this is an argument I'll link to down below, that there's an implied contract. So it says here, people often argue that running ad blocking software is violating an implied contract between the reader and the publisher. The publisher offers the page content to the reader for free in exchange for the reader seeing the publisher's ads. And that's a nice and simple theory, but it's a blurry line in reality. By that implied contract theory, readers should not only permit their browsers to load the ads, but they should also actually read each one, giving themselves a chance to develop an interest for the advertised product or service, and maybe even click on it and make a purchase. That's also a nice theory, but of course, it's ridiculous to expect anyone to actually do that. Publishers are lucky if people even read the content with any real attention today, let alone the ads around it. And this is something that I think is really important when we're discussing this, when we're discussing whether or not ad blocking the advertisement is piracy. Again, when the definition of piracy is unauthorized duplication or copying, but you're not doing any copying. What you're doing is you're viewing something that a website is hosting, and then you're parsing out what you want from what you don't want. And I think something that's really interesting here is when you actually had the IAB talking about suing ad blockers. They wanted to sue the companies that were making ad blockers. But at the end of the day, the ad blocker is simply providing people with what they want. You're suing the ad blocker because it's acceptable to sue the ad blocker and possible, whereas it is impossible to sue the person. But would they be willing to sue the person who's using the ad blocker? If that were technically feasible, if it were possible to easily detect in real time the identity of everybody viewing your website, get their home address, phone number, full name, and know that they were using an ad blocker, would it be okay if they actually sued you? Because remember, piracy is something that you can sue people for. This is something that you can actually get multi-$1,000 legal settlements on, and they were doing that for a long period of time. But that's because you are actually able to apply laws related to piracy to it. Would we be comfortable with a world where the law could be interpreted in a way where you could sue the actual person that is using the ad blocker? Because that is the logical extension of saying that this is piracy. If we say that this is piracy, that is against the law. If that is against the law, then that is something that you can be put in trouble for. Can you imagine having to pay a fine because you used an ad blocker on a website? I genuinely don't believe that that is something that would be illegal. And Linus has said, to be clear and be fair to him, he said he never said that it was illegal, but piracy is. So if you're going to call something piracy, then in some way, shape, or form, you are implying that it is illegal, because in most countries in the West, piracy is illegal. There was also a link to a tweet in that Fortune article regarding blocking ads and why you should or should not feel guilty from an NYU journalism professor. Whether you'd agree with him or disagree with him on a number of his different takes on Twitter, I thought this was interesting. Good luck with this argument. I guess nixing pop-ups makes me a destroyer of investigative journalism or something. And this is coming from somebody who is a professor of journalism at NYU. Now, something that I also think is interesting when it comes to ad blocking is the actual history of ad blocking. Remember, piracy is illegal, and it being illegal means that if it's one of those things that you probably would not put into a commercial product if you were a multi-million-dollar corporation selling a piece of electronics. Yet this is exactly what's been done for over 20 years. So I don't know if any of you watching this are old enough to remember what's in this picture. Do any of you know what this is? See this? See this? This is a VCR. And this actually says on it, if you click the picture, it has a feature called Commercial Advance. See if I could zoom in any more on this shit. Here we go. Look at that. See that? Commercial Advance. Commercial Advance is a feature that allows you to go through commercials. So this is a really, really early type of ad blocker, but back in the day, you weren't able to download television or watch online. You had to change the channel on your TV and get to it. And a VCR allowed you to record something so you could watch it after it was broadcast. And what you could do when you recorded it is you could fast forward through the ads and not watch the ads. But you still had to hit, find the remote, hit fast forward, pay attention to it long enough to see when the show came back on and hit play. What this feature would do is it would figure out where the advertisements were in the program using whatever algorithm they had inside the piece of shit 286 of a computer they had in a VCR back in the day, and they would figure out where the ads were and then just cut it out for you. Now, if ad block is piracy, is this something that would be included in a VCR? Like, would you feel comfortable selling this as RCA, Sony, Toshiba, Hitachi? You probably wouldn't, because you'd be selling something that is allowing piracy to occur on a mass scale. The reason that this VCR was able to be sold is because ad blocking fundamentally is not piracy. If it were, they would be in serious shit. Now, why is it that this was allowed, whereas ad block is really something we're actually having this conversation of piracy? I want you to think about this part really hard. Nobody cares if you mute the advertisement, completely skip it, and then go on to watch the video. Nobody cares. That's fine. If you record a piece of programming and then you fast forward the commercial, nobody cares. That's fine. If you use a VCR that has ad block built into it, like 1995 ad block from RCA, not perfect, but still pretty damn good, that would skip the commercial for you, that's fine. That's not piracy. Nobody cares. However, if you use the ad block plugin and block the advertisement from showing up in a video or on a website, that is piracy. That is wrong. Why? Advertisers have worked into their business model the fact that when they are paying for ads, that a vast majority of the population is going to completely ignore the advertisement. It will have no effect on them whatsoever, because they do not have control over the person viewing it. They cannot get out of the television set, grab you, force you like this, look at the ad, listen and pay attention. You will be quizzed at the end of this, and if you fail the quiz at the end of it because you weren't paying attention to the ad, the TV show will not play. They've accepted that they do not have that level of control over you. However, the content creators, to some extent, have not. It's totally your freedom to not pay attention to the ad, but it is not your freedom to decide what it is that gets served to you on your own computer. It just seems really weird to me that, again, the advertiser doesn't get to have that level of control over you, and they accept that within their business model. But the content creators from many different websites, they expect to have that control over what is served on your computer. The advertiser doesn't get to quiz you, and then if you did not pay attention to the ad, not serve you the content. We are not that serious with the implied contract. It's all based on a hope and a prayer that if we serve this ad to enough people, maybe a small number of them will actually pay attention to it. Now, this is where I think it's really important that you ask, what are the self-interests of all the parties involved that are making these statements? The advertiser is actually better served by you using ad block than you not watching the ad but having it served. The reason for that is because the advertiser is being paid for people to see the ad. They're being paid by the impression per 1,000 clicks, and if they have the technology now, again, we're not broadcasting over the air anymore, to actually be able to tell if you viewed the ad, and they can not pay the content creator or not pay the network or not pay YouTube because they can tell that you didn't view the ad, that means that they are now not paying for what wasn't a view, which is actually helpful to them because they don't want to pay for people who are not viewing it. If you don't watch the ad, you have your speakers muted and you walk away and then you come back, that's bad for the advertiser because they're paying for you to see the ad, to know what's being talked about, to understand their brand. Whereas if you have ad block, at least you're being honest and telling the advertiser, listen, I didn't watch this, just so you know I didn't watch this, so don't pay the network or the content creator for it. Nobody cares about that because nobody cares if the advertiser is paying and nobody's seeing their ad. But everybody cares if you ad block it and then the content creator doesn't get paid. Because back in the day, who got screwed over? Seinfeld, 24, whatever. They were not getting screwed over by this because the advertiser was paying regardless of whether you skipped over the commercial, regardless of whether you had a VCR that would skip over the commercial, regardless of the fact of whether you would get up and go take a piss the moment the commercial started and only come back to the television when the actual program was back. Whereas in our modern society, thanks to technology, the advertiser actually has a way of telling whether or not the ad was actually served. So the content creators are often aggravated at ad block, and I understand why, because they don't get paid if you block the ad. But are they simultaneously mad if you don't block the ad, but just mute it and skip over it? If they were interested in everybody involved not being screwed over, I think that they would be equally mad if the advertisement was served, but you didn't pay attention to it, because then you're screwing over the advertiser. The advertiser is paying money for you to see the ad, but that is not being served because you're not listening to it. Therefore, they got screwed over. That doesn't really seem to be what I'm hearing here. What I'm seeing is, listen, feel free. I'm just not talking about Linus here. I'm talking about people in general, these sites in general. They don't care if you don't use ad block, but pay zero attention to any of the ads. They're focused on their money. They're focused on getting paid from the advertiser. They don't necessarily care if the advertiser is actually getting value in terms of the readership actually viewing and understanding the advertisements that are being served. So, of course, nobody cared about this back in the day to that extent. Again, you wouldn't hear Seinfeld getting on TV and saying, don't fast forward the commercials. You wouldn't hear, Kiefer Sutherland getting on from 24 and saying, please don't fast forward the commercials. They fund the show. Because, again, at the end of the day, the advertiser was paying regardless of whether you fast forwarded the commercials. Nowadays, you hear people saying, don't install ad block, don't install ad block. It's not because they're concerned about the advertiser. It's because they're concerned about themselves. If you block the ad, the advertiser doesn't have to pay the content creator or the network for the value that they didn't get. Whereas if you don't install ad block, but you're not watching the ads, you're helping out the content creator. But in some sense, are you not screwing over the advertiser? Again, the advertiser is paying for you to actually pay attention to what it is they watched. And that article really does nail the point when they say that if there is an implied contract that you will have this ad be served, then isn't there also, quote, an implied contract that you're actually going to pay attention to the ad, that you're going to read it, give the advertiser a chance to make their case, so that you can develop an interest for their product, maybe click on it, read about what it's about. There's implied contracts there are really, in my opinion, just bullshit. But where do you draw the line? Obviously, buying a CD and making 1,000 copies of it and then selling those copies that you made of the CD, I think we can all say is piracy. You're making money off of somebody else's work and you are distributing it without their consent. Ad block on a website, I think what you're doing there is, listen, they're saying, we're going to deliver you all this stuff, and you're saying, it's my computer. I have the option to consent as to what is run on that computer. You are sending me all of this stuff. I'm going to take this and not take that. And again, if they're going to be mad, if anybody's going to be aggravated that you have used ad block, are they mad when you don't use ad block but don't view the ad? But don't pay attention to the advertiser, but don't check the advertiser out, but take no interest in them, but go to the bathroom while the advertisement is playing? Because I think that's really the natural progression of that thought process. If there's an implied contract that you're supposed to actually not use ad block, is there not an implied contract that you're also supposed to pay attention to the ads? Because again, to be fair here, we don't want to just be fair to the content creator. We also need to be fair to the advertiser who's actually funding everything. And further, if it is piracy, which is in our law illegal, does that then justify taking that action? Again, if I were to spread content, if I were to download an Eminem song and then make it available so that anybody can go to rossmangroup.com and download that Eminem song, legal action can be taken against me because I am now taking part in online piracy. Would we want to live in a society where when you use ad block, again, because this is what we're talking about here when we're talking about the law, legal action can be taken against you for using ad block? I would say no. I would also say that we don't live in that society right now because ad block fundamentally is not piracy. Now, there is a lot to be said for whether or not people would make the content if nobody watched the ads. Again, would I sit here yelling into my camera the exact same way if I knew that there was zero chance of any ads being served because 100% of you used ad block, 0% of you used YouTube Red, and I made no money? I don't know. Maybe it would be different. Again, maybe instead of making 640 component level border pair videos, maybe I would have stopped at 40 or 50 or 60. I honestly, I can't really tell you. But I get the idea there that Linus is saying. We are making this content with the idea that a vast majority of the people will load the ads. Without that, that's kind of that's our business model. But is that a you problem or is that a them problem? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Again, my stance on this is that it is not piracy. I think that this is different than the example of walking into Cirque du Soleil. Again, there are a limited number of seats in a theater, and more importantly, or if you want to really dig into this, when you walk into theaters, whether it's Cirque du Soleil or a movie theater, sometimes they have advertisements before the movie starts. If I go to the bathroom and take a piss and don't watch the ads before the movie starts, is that piracy? And again, whether or not you use ad block, again, I don't particularly care. I'm honestly still beyond dumbfounded that anybody watches this shit and that there's anybody willing to advertise on what is essentially man screaming at cloud. Like that's, oh man. So sometimes I'll read these comments from people saying that, like he made these videos with the idea that he would get rich and famous and blah, blah for them. It's like, dude, watch this. Like, you genuinely believe that when I put up my little fucking cell phone camera on a stand with Mr. Clinton scratched up panels in the background, wearing my crappy black sweater, no lighting, no haircut, just yelling into the camera, that this was my path to making money on the internet? I'm as surprised as you all are. Anyway, that's it for today. And as always, I hope you learned something. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye now. Let me know what you think. The comments down below.